Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Everyday Woo, the place where we talk about the magical side of life with everyday people. I'm Amy from Cultivating Silence, and today I'm talking with Chris, who is an engineer as well as a writer and an improvisationalist. And today we're going to find out about Chris's experiences with the woo. So, hi, Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Amy.
Good, good. It's good to see you. So I like to start off asking people what their definition of the woo is.
Yeah, probably, um, well, probably in my earlier life, it would have been more negative, maybe more like occult or something like that, right? But over the years, I've become more open to these sort of things. So it would still be those sort of unexplained things that maybe make you uncomfortable, or because you can't explain them, because they're um, sort of from maybe a different dimension or something. You just can't put your finger on what it is, so it makes you a little uncomfortable, but you realize, yeah, I can't just sweep that under the carpet.
Okay. So have you had any experiences that you could not sweep under the carpet?
Well, there's one that I'll tell you the story about, but yeah, I think there was one that definitely caught my attention. Yeah.
Okay. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that.
Yeah. So I guess the backstory would be I was psyching myself up to ask my girlfriend out, to ask her to marry me. So I was trying to get my head wrapped around that idea. And so I was just alone in my room listening to music, and there was this Sheryl Crow song that came on, and it was "Are you strong enough to be my man?" So I kind of changed the lyric to "Am I strong enough to be your man?" And man, I listened to that song a lot that day, just sort of pondering what I was thinking about undertaking, right? So then I asked her to marry me. She did, and flash forward like 12 years later, and and we're separated. I get a knock on the door, and I'm being served divorce papers. So I get the papers. As soon as I close the front door, I had music on. It was just the radio, not a CD, just random radio. I closed the door. Immediately that song started. Uh, not catching the song halfway through, not a few minutes later, close the door, cue, the music starts. So that one caught my eye. I mean, I was like, oh man, okay.
And the moment that you heard it 12 years later, it was in your memory
Oh
that
yeah. I mean,
it.
I'd heard that song over the years, always kind of associated with that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So when that, yeah, I definitely realized, okay, that's pretty unique
Mhm.
coincidence, or the probability of that happening
Yeah.
exactly like that was incredibly low.
Yeah. I would agree. So I might put that in the category of a type of sign. Uh,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think that's accurate. Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
But a sign that is, to me, has a high woo content to it. Yeah.
Yes, I actually feel like any kind of sign has a woo
There
content
you go. Right, right,
in my definition of the woo. Yeah.
right.
I actually have a pretty broad definition of woo. I was just speaking with someone earlier today about their definition, and they included lots of different types of spirituality type
Mm,
things, and I would agree with that. And so I would just open it up to that type of definition for you as well. Under the category of spirituality. I don't know, does that bring anything else to mind, whether it's you or someone that you've known?
I mean, I grew up in a very religious family, so there's always been a strong element of that growing up. So it's not that unfamiliar, I suppose. Um, Whether or not I bought into it all was a different story. But yeah, I was always surrounded by uh, people who put a lot of value on prayer and asking, that kind of thing. So that doesn't strike me as unusual, I guess I could say. Um, and then I think over the last 15 years or so, I've also become more confident in, um, if you're clear about what you want, some people call it a vision board or all. I don't get into that element of it, but I think it is important to know what you want. And then I think just naturally you're listening for that stuff more, right? So it may seem like a coincidence, but I think you're creating your own luck or something maybe in that value.
Yeah, I agree with that. In psychologically, that whole idea of when you put something into your mind, when you walk out the door, you're going to notice that much.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. And I was speaking with someone yesterday, and we were talking about what I believe it's important, and that person did as well, to be somewhat skeptical
Hmm.
about all of the quote unquote woo experiences that we have, and to kind of, I think balance is important in everything in life, but in this area as well, to kind of have a balance and make sure you're not placing meaning onto something that isn't actually there.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think we're all responsible for our own actions and have to create our own. I mean, obviously, a lot of us are born with way better benefits than others,
Mhm.
but so you have a responsibility either not to lose those benefits that you were, just given, or or to create new ones. Where am I going with this? But oh yeah, so yeah, I think you have a lot of responsibility to create your own luck. And maybe, like you were saying, you don't be a little skeptical of these things that you think are just falling in place. I think it's more about putting yourself in the right environment where those things are more probable to happen.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe along these lines is about taking too much in from things that are more. The word static came to mind, but I don't know why I said that. But so some friends of mine are really into tarot cards, and but they all seem to use them more as just interesting, um, thought-provoking. They're not looking for them to tell them what to do in life, which I find um, comfortable to be around. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I actually believe in those types of tools. I would put some stock in tarot and astrology and things like
Hmm.
that. But yes, I have heard of people who use like a pendulum. I don't know if you're familiar with a pendulum. A pendulum is, on a string or a chain, and then there's a stone at the bottom of it. Usually, it can be different types of things. It can be metal, it can be a crystal. And then you can use it. I've used them before, and you can use it. You hold it in a certain position, and you ask a question, and
Hmm.
the energy begins to create movement
Oh,
in the stone or in the pendulum. And if it goes a certain way, there's different ways to read it.
ah,
If it goes counterclockwise for me, that would be a no. If it goes clockwise for me, that would be a yes. There's different people do it in different ways. But I have in my years in the work that I have done, I'm a psychotherapist, but I have been trained in energy work as well, and so I have heard of some people who really decide what they're going to eat
mm,
by, oh my goodness, well, I have to check with the pendulum, and this is a long way of reflecting back that I agree with what you're saying, to use these tools not to make every decision of our lives, I think is actually important as well. So there's
right, right, exactly. So yeah, an example from even just Wednesday, I guess it was. Uh, a bunch of us went to a yoga studio, and um, we didn't do a bit of yoga. It turned out to be just a pure meditation event, but it was really nice. I enjoyed it, and the uh, the instructor started it by saying she had drawn a tarot card at the beginning of, when she was getting ready to what she was going to lead us through, and it was a card of the Eight of Fire or something like this, she said. And her interpretation of that card was it was about taking action or something, I think she said. It was also being translated in Spanish, so I'm not sure exactly how much I got. But the but yeah, so that was just she threw that out there, and I thought, well, that's interesting because the next thing I was going to do when I got back to my apartment was I was setting up to have a phone call with a software designer about a piece of software I was interested in to undertake a large design effort on my own for my own project. So it was like very much taking that first big confident step into, I'd done a bunch of research and now I was really about ready to go. So yeah, again, those sort of things, like I wasn't going to base my decision on this, but it was that moment of like, oh, I can make a connection, and that's kind of interesting. But I didn't feel like it was woo or anything. I just felt it was, again, I was already leading my life that way, and this was not even confirmation, just interesting connection.
Yeah, well, I love that story. And it brings to mind that I actually believe that the things that light up for us as we're walking through our life and our days, and that's very important.
Mhm.
Um, I'm, I shouldn't be telling stories. You should be telling a story, but I'm going to tell one story, probably the second one in this chat today. But when I was young, I was training to be an actress,
Ah,
and I was teaching to make a living, and while I was going to school, and I had just gotten headshots done, and I had a lot of makeup on, and I
mm.
had to go to work like that. So one of the fellow teachers, an older, I was in my 20s and she was older at the time, and I'm, her age now. So she looked at me and she's like, "What is going on with you?" And I told her what was happening, and she said, "Why do you want to do that?" She
Ah,
said, "Life is a cabaret." And obviously that's a well-known phrase, right?
right. Yeah.
But that me hearing that, I needed to hear that in that moment, and it lit up for me so strongly. And obviously I didn't, I mean, I love to perform, and so I followed that a little bit. It's fun,
Yeah.
but I did not base my life around it. And that was just one of those things, just like you in the yoga class with that tarot card. Everybody else could have heard that and it would have meant nothing to them.
Right.
But it lit up for you. That's why I'm sharing the story. Is this making any
Yeah.
sense?
No, it does exactly right. And I think that's the same thing where, I am more attuned or more listening better. And so yeah, you pick up these little things, and they make life interesting, and it's kind of fun.
Yeah, and I'd love to go down a little track of, you talked about clarity, being clear,
Mhm.
and being responsible. And I think those are two elements that are really needed for us to create our lives. I actually
Mhm.
believe we all kind of create our own lives, or at least we co-create it. And when you're clear and when you take responsibility for yourself, I believe that's kind of when some of these kind of woo experiences start to pop. So I guess I would just ask you a little bit about both of those qualities. What would you say helps you to be clear in who you are and what you want to do? How do you find your own clarity?
It's certainly getting easier. Maybe it's just age, I don't know. But yeah, I think it's a lot of it is simplifying, right? And just not being worried about what others are doing, or not thinking you're supposed to be on a certain track or anything. Just that's the big first step that I had to take, was just like, what I'm not even sure what I want, but I just need to be open to doing new things, and saying yes. Like you mentioned, I got into improv, fortunately, at a very important time. If I hadn't, I don't know, I would have been a lockdown person. So saying yes to things that I probably wouldn't have said yes to, but being responsible, not just being crazy and or selfish or something. But yeah, saying yes to things that were good that pushed you out of your comfort zone um, was a huge first step to at least getting on that path. I don't know, I'm still on it, but whether or not uh, I think the big part about getting clear, I think you mentioned was, I don't know if I think of my life in those terms, but definitely being more open and and being a little bit more, maybe the clear for me means a little bit more. I've always said if I can boil something down to a sentence of what I want, I can make it happen. It might take me 10 years. And I think that's the nice thing is I'm not, you know, grading myself on how long it takes. Uh, I
Beautiful.
just know I know what I want. And I used to sail a lot, and I've used a sailing analogy a lot when I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing. I know where the point in sailing racing, you have maybe 3 or 4 marks on the course. You have to take them in a certain order on a certain side of the boat. But how people get to those is wildly different. Some people go off to this direction. So the race looks chaotic. You wouldn't even think they're in the same race. And you're having to adapt to all sorts of variables that are happening. Um, and so I kind of look at life that way. Sometimes where I want to go is way over off my left shoulder, but I'm taking this tact right now because it's actually the best and fastest given all the variables. So I think once I kind of put all that together, it also helps. Like, okay, I have a general idea where I want to go, what I want to accomplish. The path there is going to be not at all what I think it's going to be, but we'll get there.
That is so beautiful, Chris, and that's such a wonderful analogy. Thank you for that. And when I'm listening to you, the things that stand out to me are your ability to say yes,
Yeah.
which involves taking risk.
Hmm.
Because when you have something that you want to do, oftentimes we're very fearful. But you've learned how to take that risk and say yes. And then another component that you're talking about, and correct me if I get this wrong, but I believe is not judging. So
Yeah.
you are not judging yourself, and you're not worried about anybody else who might be looking at you saying, "Oh, you're off course, buddy. You know, you're on the wrong path."
Right.
You don't worry about what other people are thinking about you, and you're not judging yourself.
Yeah. Hopefully on a percentage level, yes, maybe 75% of that's true, and then 25% you're struggling with all the usual doubts and everything. But yeah, most of the time, and you can I'm better at recognizing when I'm falling into that 25% of doubt time, and then I can kind of correct. But yeah, I mean, we're all we're all struggling with those insecurities, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I think though what you're talking about is so beautiful. To me, it's about loving ourselves.
Yeah.
But yeah, we all have those struggles, but we don't beat ourselves up for them. And you have awareness of when you're in that 25%,
Yeah.
but you love yourself through it. You keep going and you get back on track.
Right.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you.
So, yeah, yeah, thank you. There's, I think, one other, maybe two other questions. I'm wondering how do you know what you want? Where does that
Yeah.
come from, and how do you know? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the one that's always the hard one to pin down, right? Uh, yeah, that one is still a little obscure. It's around a whole bunch of things, but they all take a lot of time and energy and risk. So to try and figure out what that best use of time and energy is and which one's the priority, that's been the struggle recently. Um, and feeling like you're getting the right skill sets in place and all that. That's where I have to give myself time. Like these are long processes. It's not going to happen overnight. Um, yeah, so how to figure that one out is that's definitely where I'm at still, trying to make sure I'm zeroing in on what it is. And then, you get distracted with some other thing or something pops up that seems to have all those elements. Uh, but you just know the timing's not right or something. So yes, that is the current place I'm at right now is figuring out what it is, what it is that I'm going after specifically. Yeah.
And how do you, I'm sorry, I just
Yeah.
asked, I'm going to ask it again.
Yeah, yeah. I figured
But
I
in that,
missed it a little.
sorry.
Yeah, I figured I was like, oh, I'm not, I didn't quite get to the answer there, or I didn't, yeah. Go ahead.
No, that's fine.
Yeah,
It was everything you described was valuable, but it brings me to want to ask again. So when you're in the struggle and you don't quite know
yeah,
what what happens for you, let's go back to your analogy, for you to know. Now, I don't sail, so I'll get this wrong, but to know
right.
whether to go left or right, which would be different words in the
Yeah, yeah, right, right. Yeah, you make that decision when you realize, yeah, the boat's just not responding at its peak, or you're reading the current of the water, and you're seeing the wind direction. You're like, well, yeah, things have changed, and if I stay with this, I'm going to lose time. But I have to also evaluate if I change, that has its own inefficiencies. Will I make it up or not? So you're evaluating all those. So yeah, in real life, yes, if you're pursuing, I can you I think you know, my brother and I bought a bunch of land about 10 years ago now and planted a hazelnut orchard. And so that's a long-term effort. And we're about in 8 years, 10 years into it now. And yeah, we're looking to a pivot because, it's been transformational and great, but is it as sustainable and fun and desirable going forward for the next 20 years? And so yeah, we've just got that feeling in your bones, like, okay, I've done this, and it's not it's served a great purpose, but maybe it's time to explore something else. So I guess that's my answer is when do I know? I'm still missing the question.
no, no,
But
yeah.
yeah, how do I know when to pivot or something? And it's just a feeling when the objectives I had back to the sailing, I wanted to get to this mark at this time. I'm trying to beat the other sailor, which I'm trying to see how they're doing. So it's a little bit of comparing, which you're not supposed, but it's a race. So that's a little different. You're specifically in a race. But even if you're trying to pass these milestones at a certain time, you're like, well, only I want to get this accomplished, and it's going to take a long time. And the task that I thought I had allotted what it was probably a reasonable amount of time, or fun, or pain, or whatever you're experiencing, right? And you're like, okay, this is the risk reward is not panning out enough. Let me see if I can do better.
Okay,
So
so
yeah, it's a moving emotional evaluation that you have to make, and then adjust.
thank you for that. To me, that's a very beautiful response. What I take away from all of that is you at first described sustainability, fun, and I think you used the
Yeah,
word desirable.
yeah,
And think and I, as you were saying those, I was like, okay, that's a little bit of the head, a little bit of analysis, and a lot of the heart and the gut.
yeah,
Then as you kept describing it, you talked about, well, it's a feeling and
right,
it's an emotion, and you're following your feelings, you're
right,
trusting your gut.
yeah,
And that's along with some,
right,
using your head and analyzing and logic and all of that. But again, we'll talk about balance, right?
right.
There's a lot of, okay, what am I feeling?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even back to that farm analogy, right? We committed time and money and energy and literally sweat and blood to go out there and build this thing. And maybe in my 20s, I would have thought, nope, I've chosen this path and I can't get off of it. It would have been failure or look stupid if I give up on what I did. But no, not anymore. I'm looking at it as like, no, it served its purpose. And I can tell, back to your gut feeling, I don't really want to do this for another 20 years. Is there another way out? And that's more interesting. And I can get back to that fun. The first years of the farm were incredibly fun because you let yourself play with new things. And so, yeah. Uh, Yeah,
That's
that head and heart thing is and gut is very true.
Yeah, and all along as you're talking, I'm thinking you're talking a lot about it reminds me of improv, saying yes and having
Hmm.
fun. But in the beginning, we talked about the idea of responsibility as well. So again, there's balance between,
Hmm.
yeah, we all have to take responsibility and be responsible, especially for our own lives, but also this component of what I call just loving the self, allowing for lack of judgment, spontaneity, following the fun.
Right.
And in my experience, that also creates these little synchronicities, these little awarenesses, these
Right.
ahas like you had in yoga,
Yeah.
like this thing and it lit up for you. And I don't know, I think it's a pretty good way to live your life.
Yeah, it sparked another little quick example there with even with this farm analogy I'm on now, right? We were starting to feel a little bit, you know, trapped. Maybe that's too hard of a word, but definitely like, oh man, I am into something that's going to take the rest of my life, and maybe that's not as enjoyable as I want. I'm experiencing other things that are bringing me more joy, and maybe this is going to be more of an anchor than not. And so I was already puzzling, like, okay, what do I do with this? How can I fix this or pivot it or something? Didn't know what. In the mail arrives a brochure from a company asking if they could lease our land to make a solar farm. I'm like, well, I had never even thought of that. But yeah, then saying yes because I thought, well, that's an interesting pivot, and it solves a lot of problems. I get to be, they take care of everything. I was like, man, that's an elegant solution, and so that's what pivoted us to this solar farm thing, which is now a new pivot because we weren't able to come to terms with any of the companies. So now we're doing that back to that tarot card fire thing. Is like, well, maybe we do this whole thing ourselves, which is a huge undertaking, like using my engineering background. That's the meeting I had was to find the software that the industry uses to do the design. I mean, it's another big cost step up and all of this, but would be wildly fascinating and a huge new pivot in my life, and the end game could be interesting. And so yeah, all these things, like you said, they build. And so yeah, those little flyers that arrived in the mail at the right moment. But, maybe that's a woo, but I think it's more of just that would have arrived in the mail anyway, and I would have just thrown it out. But because I was thinking about it and because I was letting myself think about what did I want to do, I picked it out and knew exactly why I wanted to read that thing and why I wanted to call them.
Yeah, and to me, that is part of the woo.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is that weird gray area, if you will, of um, letting yourself go, oh, that's interesting, but I'm ready for this. And yeah, recognizing it.
Yeah. Beautiful, Chris. I'm so grateful for you to share all these stories today. I think you're talking about, I already said this, what a beautiful way to live your life.
Yeah.
And I really mean that. I mean, to me, you're talking about being open, being loving, and following your heart really as you create your life. And that's just wonderful.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up. I'll say thank you again, Chris, for really wonderful conversation and helping us all kind of hear your experiences of saying yes and following life. It's very beautiful. And I don't know, maybe we'll chat again sometime on the Everyday Woo. But for
Love
today,
to. Yeah.
great. Thank you, and thank everyone. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much.
Bye bye.